Hey, everybody. Wednesday morning, we're back again. I'm here with two of my favorites, Hillary Sharton and Becky Frost. You may recognize them from, I don't know, TV or news broadcasts. I think Hillary's been on about 90 in the past week. But they've got some pretty cool and interesting data that they're going to share with you today that we just released this morning. So with that, Becky, take it away. Have fun.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for being here today, Hillary.
Thanks so much for having me, Becky.
It's awesome to see you. Hey, everyone, welcome to today's live stream, and thanks for joining us. We are going to be talking today, imagine this, about remote learning. Surprise, surprise. But before we get started and we dive into that, Hillary, tell us a little bit more about your role at Instructure, and also, I don't know that everyone knows this about you, what you did in the K-12 world before joining the company.
Sure. My role at Instructure is product strategy, which means that I help our product and engineering teams figure out what the important things are to add to Canvas or to build as actually new products. And I've worked here for almost 8 years now. Before that, though, I worked in K-12, and I did response to intervention and positive behavior intervention supports, which are K-12 nerdy things. They're basically around helping students learn better and help them behave better in the classroom.
Awesome. So in those studies with psychology, I want to draw upon that today for helping students and how we can be helping students. We're also going to learn a little bit more about how parents are feeling right now. Before we dive in, I want to talk about another role that you haven't discussed yet, and that's the role of being a parent in this time of remote teaching and our students fighting us more than they probably ever would any teacher. How's that going for you?
You know, it's been a challenge. I in spite of having some background in education, I have never tried to do all of my daughter's schooling myself. Yeah. And so really figuring out the parameters of how to set her up mentally for success to do school at home, as well as figuring out, what it is that she actually needs to be able to learn at home.
Yes.
Learning curve.
Yes, exactly. Bonjour Dominique, vous êtes le bienvenu chez Canvas. We are so happy that you've joined us. And that also reminds me, throughout our live stream today, if you have comments or questions as we start digging into this data a little more, please feel free to post them. All right. So Hillary, I think a lot of people do feel the same way. Teaching is something that definitely is, it's hard and it's a full-time job. And when you're trying to do a full-time job on top of that and teach your children, it can be challenging. So I know that people feel the same way. And I really have the data about that because Canvas commissioned a nationwide survey. We talked to more than 1,000 respondents, 1,000 parents of K-12 students all across the country about how they're feeling and adjusting to remote learning. So let's dig into the stats. Throughout today, we're going to be sharing a few infographics and info bits as well. If for some reason you're watching this and you have a burning desire to have these stats, they'll be up on the Canvas blog right after this. So that's where you can grab them. So first of all, today we asked parents to tell us, or in our survey, we asked parents to tell us what their top 3 challenges were. And here they are. And they sure told us. So that 49% of us are struggling to keep kids focused on schoolwork. And that number goes up a lot when we're talking about elementary students, particularly our younger elementary students. The highest level of challenge was with our kindergartners, but all the way through elementary, those numbers are even higher. Hillary, as a former school psychologist, tell us a little bit more, help us understand kids' attention spans.
Sure. So we know from decades of research on the brain and learning that students can pay attention to something really for about 2 to 5 minutes per year they are old. And that might sound short if you think about how long your child can sit in front of the TV and watch cartoons or movies or play video games, but that's not the same kind of attention. So really you need to do the math An 8-year-old has maybe 20 minutes of good attention inside them, and it's not something that kids have control over. Some of my friends have complained to me, like, they will watch TV for an hour, but I just can't get them to focus no matter what I do. And it really isn't something that kids are doing on purpose. It's also really variant and dependent on personality, environment, their history, even their physiological state, whether they're hungry or tired can affect this too.
That is so true. And knowing, one of the things that I've noticed as a parent teaching to, one elementary and one middle school student, my boys, is that if it's not working, if we have a set schedule, but for some reason on this particular day, it's not working, adjust, right? Teaching it one day at a time activity right now. And we are juggling a lot, both the kids and parents or guardians. And as a lot of us are juggling work activities and work responsibilities and helping children with schoolwork, it's getting harder. And like I said, with our younger kids, it becomes even more difficult. What can parents do to set expectations, clear expectations with our kids at this time?
Well, Becky, you actually mentioned one of them already. I think there are two really important things to do, but the first one is setting a down to the minute schedule. Kids of all ages, they love routines. And the magic in there for kids is knowing what's next. Probably all of us as parents had a book or a movie that our kidlet wanted to watch over and over and over and over and over again. And it could be that content was really excellent, but it's more likely that kids are getting a lot of comfort from the repetition of seeing or hearing something like that over and over again. It lets them see the world as predictable and safe. So if you can make a schedule down to the minute so that kids know what's happening now, what's happening next, and when to expect things, and then if you can stick to it, that's a super helpful environmental control that you can put on to make sure students are learning better.
Oh, great. What else can we be doing?
The second thing I would recommend is setting. If you've ever gone and watched your kidlet at school, they behave so much differently than they do at home. And part of that is the environmental cues that they're getting, right? They're seeing other kids behaving in a certain way at school. They have desks to sit in that are physically built to support how they need to hold their body to do learning. And none of that really is present at home. At home is where, I kick back and relax and I can be goofy and silly and not be serious about what's happening. So if we can set up a specific school area inside our homes, even down to, looking for a desk that mimics the kind of desk that they're using at school, that'll remind them, that'll trigger memories of those good learning behaviors that they engage in at school, and it'll make it easier for them to stay on task.
Yes, exactly. And noting that, before all this happened and we were locked down, a lot of people were able to go. Making desks doesn't have to be an expensive thing, or designing a setting in your home if you don't have the means to go and purchase new furniture. I grew up with a single parent, and I actually remember saving up for a desk for quite some time. So making the setting something where learning happens. So whether that's up to the table or in a room, designated space, we actually noticed huge success. This is going to sound weird, but putting a tablecloth on our kitchen table on just one area where our middle schooler studies every day, and designating a learning corner. So it looks different than where he eats every day. The setup is something where he goes, and that's where he learns. Eddie, this is a great comment. So the largest thing you've noticed is juggling the amount of screen time. Yeah, especially as working parents, it can be so hard to not just give them the screen and say, I need it quiet, please go play a video game or watch some TV. Especially because we can tire students out with e-learning if they're always on other screens too. So boundaries is really important. And for those of you who don't follow Eddie on Twitter. He is also a Canvas caster, and I highly recommend checking out that podcast. Super interesting. Diana, yeah, juggling e-learning as a parent and an educator, lots of challenges. Let's dig into a few more of those. So rounding out those top 3 challenges that parents reported across the country was having unclear instructions from teachers or schools. And let me be the first to say, this survey went out the first 2 weeks in April. And from personal experience, I know that I've learned a lot. My schools have learned a lot. My teachers have changed the way they're communicating. I think at first people were overwhelmed and wanted to just get everything there, you know, almost mimicking the classroom. And what we quickly learned and saw was that that just overwhelms our teachers and our students. It feels like a lot of schools have shifted since then. But Hillary, what can we do, or what can schools be doing to make sure that we help learning continue and that we're not overwhelming our students?
You're right, Becky. We're all in this together, and our goal is really just to keep learning. Even in my house, my own kidlet has seen a huge change in both the amount and the type of work she's doing. Teachers are recognizing in her school, and she's a junior in high school, she's 17. Teachers are recognizing that students can get overwhelmed by looking at a giant to-do list. Yeah. And it's much harder for her to learn without a teacher there to explain and help. So the sheer volume of work is smaller.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing lots more teachers sharing video instruction using other resources like math instruction websites. I also see districts changing even the grading structure.
Right.
We're including things like pass-fail, recognizing that the difficulties in learning right now could potentially have a huge impact on kids' GPA or class rank in the future.
Right. And knowing and communicating that clearly with our kids. So our district went to this and communicated this last week that we're going to pass fail, but they still also were really good about setting expectations. So they also told us when instruction would end for the year, and then also communicated clearly that we would have a certain period of time where students could make sure that they were submitting any missing assignments, so then that pass fail grade could be issued. And of course, no one's looking to fail our kids right now. You know, there's so much going on in the world. So everything that schools can be doing and parents can be doing to help our students is wildly important. One day at a time, that's for sure. So we're learning new ways to learn together. And in fact, this is something that we asked our parents of students about. So in this next stat that you'll be seeing on your screen in just a second, there it is. Kids are learning new ways to learn. So 56% of elementary school students, particularly the ones in grades 4+, had some sort of online learning experience before the pandemic. But now nearly 80% of all students, including the younger grades, have online learning experience. Their districts and schools are logging in and using a learning management system. Before, it felt like a nice support. And ultimately, that's what our LMS, learning management system, should be. It's just a way for students to extend the classroom and be a support for them. But now it's become a lifeline for us, a temporary lifeline. This will get better, but a lifeline nonetheless. This is so real at my school, or my house and in my school. My middle schooler is using Canvas more than he did before, and my 4th grader is using Canvas for the first time with his teacher. At first, we didn't have enough devices, so they were sharing a computer. Luckily enough, we have a neighbor who actually is involved in computer resale, and so we were able to get a device for our child. And the school, if we would have needed it, the school also had a one-to-one device initiative where if kids needed to pick up a device, they could. I promise there's a point to this, and that is it's really important for us to think about equity in education. And this issue, this pandemic, has shined a light on the inequity in education right now. We could spend hours and hours talking about equity in education and bring on thousands of teachers and get so many good ideas on how to make more equitable access to education. But right now, I just want to take a few minutes, Hillary, and I know it's just tip of the iceberg stuff, but what are we getting right about supporting students right now, and how can we help more right now, and then also when this is over and we return to school?
Sure. Districts have thought since the beginning of time about equity differences as far as students are going, because we know that our most at-risk students need a little bit more than really our typical kids do if we want them to catch up and continue to make progress. And I'm seeing districts get super creative with how they're enabling more equity, particularly for at-risk students. Like you mentioned, Becky, school districts are doing device checkouts or increasing the number of devices that they have in a one-to-one rollout. Teachers are really differentiating lesson plans now. We kind of have the first wave of this is our online content and this is how we're doing online. And now teachers are providing supports on either end of the spectrum for our kids who maybe need depth and breadth or some who need remediation. And there's a lot of thought actually going into how to provide internet access. If you're in a rural area or maybe a low SES area, internet access is still not ubiquitous. And so districts are doing lots of really interesting things like collaborating with their local internet providers to give students free access while they're doing school at home, or even putting Wi-Fi on their buses and sending their buses out to neighborhoods so that kids can log on to the Wi-Fi from the bus, which I think is just the most creative thing I've ever heard. But what's really important to remember is no matter where you are in the US and no matter what school or district you're in, there are equity issues in your buildings. And so it's hugely important to provide resources and remember those at-risk students so that they don't fall behind.
Yeah, that resonates so much. No matter where we are, there are equity issues. You can be working. I grew up in an area where this was not something that was focused on a lot. And yet, I mentioned that my mom actually was a teacher when we were younger. She was a single parent and my older sister was disabled. So we spent a lot of time and money on doctors. So we didn't have a lot of time and money for computers and things like that. And so even though outwardly, I would add that students don't always show or even feel like they can say, hey, I don't have this. So hats off to the numbers of teachers who've been connecting with students and really helping them and removing any type of uncertainty or inability to really communicate or talk about, hey, I need some help right now. I love that what you said. So that highlights now more than ever as well that connection really matters. You know, being able as a parent to ask for help or students to ask for help, and just also having that face-to-face. Nothing can replace the face-to-face time that we're losing in our classroom, but we can certainly use technology to help still keep those connections going. And in fact, that's the next and final stat that we wanted to share with everyone today is how people are staying connected. So video conferencing is really coming in handy. And when asked about how this is being used for their students, parents said teachers are covering new materials for the number one thing that rose to the top. And these were multiple choice questions, so there could be more than 100%. I know people are looking at this and thinking your math is way off, but I promise it's multiple choice selections where they could choose more answers. These were the top 4 answers. Teachers are checking in on progress, and I've personally seen this, I bet you have too. Teachers are also being available to help with schoolwork. And then we're also using it to connect with classmates. And I wanted to share a few interesting ways that connection is happening. So one of the best moments of my day is when my 4th grade son's teacher takes all the kids off Zoom for the last 2 minutes of the call, and they all talk to each other. And it's just unbridled happy chaos. And he loves that part of the conversation most. My 7th grader has a connection with their school counselor. So every day they have their circle talks, where the counselor gets online and talks to students about how they're dealing with this, because this is huge for a lot of kids and what they're dealing with. So there are lots of ways that we're using video conferencing to maintain connections. So we've focused on, we're focusing on that connection, but Hillary, what else are you seeing right now when it comes to staying connected?
You know, technology has been super important, and I'm seeing a lot of that for students and teachers, and even students to students maintaining contact with each other. But it doesn't have to be about the technology. I saw the funnest thing here in my own neighborhood a couple of weeks ago. The elementary teachers did a parade like in their cars with like banners and balloons driving up and down the neighborhood streets so that they could get a chance to wave at their students and say hello. Teachers are super missing those connections just as much as our kidlets are, and it was just the cutest thing. But students can also write letters. They could record themselves talking on a recording device and share that with teachers or friends. You can also do just a good old-fashioned phone call, right? There are so many ways that we can connect without technology. I think it's important to remember that it doesn't have to be about Zoom.
Exactly. And Marcus, you bring up a great point as well, and thank you for joining us today. Offering that content asynchronously is super important. So if you are delivering something live, making sure that it's available for learners who can't join that live session. That really helps everyone stay in sync without having to be online at the same time. Hillary, we focused on some big issues today, and I could spend the rest of the day talking to you, but I know we have to wrap it up soon. But one other thing that we did with this research is we really gathered educators together, former school psychologists like yourself, and really focused on some tips to help parents and guardians right now with their kids so that they can finish the year strong and not just taper off. What are some things that we can be doing to help our students finish that year and stay connected to learning?
I think the important things to remember are, and there are lots of things that we could be focusing on, but some of the most important ones are, if you haven't already, create time and space for school. Define the location, communicate your expectations with your kidlet, and make sure that you're using a schedule. Also be sure to reach out to your kids' teachers. Ask teachers what their preferred communication methods are and whether or not they have office hours, and really don't hesitate to reach out with questions or to offer support and thanks for all the hard work that teachers are doing right now. Actually, please do remember to thank them, because this is super hard for teachers too.
Yeah, I reiterate that. I know we've got some more tips that we want to go over here in the last few minutes, but sharing a thank you to a teacher without unprompted actually helped one of my child's teachers just tell me that really brightened their day and helped them. So taking a moment, especially if we haven't already, to just send a note of thanks and specifically highlight, hey, I really appreciate you setting really clear expectations with my kid, or it's really helped my child to learn when you do this, right? Letting them know specific feedback is super helpful and super important. What are some other tips that we can be doing? Great.
Sure. It's also really important to remember those attention spans. Your kid is not off task usually because they're trying to make you angry or they're trying to irritate you. Younger kids need shorter instructions and shorter periods of work. Everyone's going to need built-in breaks, and this is important for us as parents also. Take a break, go for a walk, step away from your screen every now and again, and give your brain some downtime.
One of my favorite things to do with my 4th grader is to go out in the backyard, and we are using the trampoline now more than ever. And it's just a great I highly recommend it if people have, can take their child on a quick 5-minute walk during the day, or spend some time in the backyard throwing a ball around or jumping on the trampoline or whatever is available to you to do. It's great for them as a break, but there's some benefits for us as well.
There are huge benefits. Exercise actually makes it easier for you to think clearly, and that may be one of the reasons that students say their favorite part of their school day is recess. It's super important we don't forget about recess. Our life can start running together when we're stuck at home and not going anywhere. Make sure that your kids are getting downtime, and that hopefully includes fresh air and physical activity.
That's awesome. We've got time for just one more tip, Hillary. What's one thing that everyone should remember?
I think it's really important right now, maybe most important, for parents to remember that they need to have regular conversations with their kids about what's going on. Kids see what's happening. They hear about coronavirus on the news, and all the research that we have in psychology about how children experience trauma tells us that if they see a parental role model for how to respond in a healthy way during a crisis, they're far, far less likely to come out on the other side with any detrimental things like PTSD. So make sure that you as parents are talking to your kids and modeling hope and resilience and humor, not only so that they can be healthy right now, but also so that they can learn really important life skills for how to handle trauma in the future.
I love it. Check in with your kids and find ways to inject humor. If there's something that's bringing you as a parent hope and joy right now, and it's appropriate to share with your kids, go ahead and share it, and establish those fun activities as well. Hillary, thank you so much for your time today. For all of you who joined us today, thank you so much. If you'd like to learn more about our study, go to canvaslms.com and check out our blog. We've got the details about the study and also a few infographics for parents and also for you teachers. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we'll talk to you again later.
Thanks, Becky.